I want to hear cannons. Three-step drop, goes on the end zone. Caught ball, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans reaches up with one hand and grabs it in.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
We don't even keep score. We just run that up and leave.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Throws up with the head to the side at the 40. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl.
This is Mike Allstott, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and you're listening to the Cannon Fire Podcast.
And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and good morning, ladies and gentlemen, to a live episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast on YouTube this Saturday morning for our Week 2 game preview episode. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. It's been an exciting week for the sport of football, not just the NFL, obviously, with regular season action being back, but college football being as hyped as ever. The world of professional wrestling now more electric than ever as a surprise return of The Rock in Denver, Colorado last night. Everyone getting hyped for the Deion Sanders game with Colorado State this weekend. And yes, I know I just said Deion Sanders game. He's the coach. He's not going to be out there playing. But with the hype around that program, you better believe that he's going to be part of that namesake for at least the next couple of years. But today, we are here to talk about the Bears and the Bucs. This is an interesting matchup. We talked a little earlier this week with our buddy Larry D from Bears Talk Underground, and I got to tell you, with all due respect to Larry, you know, he was a very pessimistic Bears fan, which I can understand. I told him, listen, like, as a realistic Bucs fan, a lot of people take that as pessimism, but when you have to keep your expectations realistic with a bad football team, it keeps you from driving yourself insane. But again, on that note, with all due respect to Larry, he said coming into this matchup that the Bears are the better team on paper, in which I had to bite my tongue and not laugh at him. But Evan, the first question of the show, I wanted to ask you, the Bucs come into this matchup off of a win against the Vikings team that may not be as good as we initially thought they were, because on Thursday Night Football, they continue to prove they are one of the best teams in the league at turning the ball over. But the Bucs come into this game with something to prove. The Bears come into this game with something to prove. Obviously, they had a lot of stock going into this year surrounding third-year quarterback Justin Fields. The franchise showed how much faith they have in him. Go and get him some weapons over the offseason. They build that team up just right. And week 1 against the Packers, when everyone's hoping that it's not the same old Bears, they got the same old Bears. So the Bears are playing this week to prove that, you know, last week against the Packers was not a fluke. And the Bucs are doing the same thing. The Bucs are playing to prove that last week against the Vikings was also not a fluke. What are your initial impressions of this one? Because I'm pumped. I think this is a good matchup for the Bucs.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know. Maybe Giants fans. Maybe not sure if there's a more disappointed fan base though in the NFL right now after week 1, you know, than Bears fans. Because you had so much hope trading for DJ Moore, of course, and really Justin Fields, how he played down the stretch last year. You were hoping that, you know, he was going to be able to put it together. And then, you know, Aaron Rodgers goes to New York, right? And you're like, okay, he's finally away from Green Bay. Like, Jordan Love's there now. The Green Bay Packers may finally take a step back. You have your home opener week 1 against your division rival, and it's more of the same. Right. It's not really competitive. And now you have more questions than answers about your quarterback. And that's something that I know Bucs fans have a lot of experience of being, you know, with Jameis Winston, like a top draft pick that you have high hopes for. And then one game happens and all of a sudden you got more questions than answers. And it's not a good feeling. And I'm sure in that locker room, it's not a good feeling. But yeah, I mean, they're looking to come down to Tampa. And I think you're going to get a pretty desperate Bears team, because to me it feels like, I know it's only week 2, but like this feels like their season. Like there's already so much heat on them. There's already so much heat on Justin Fields, so much heat on Matt Eberflus, that it feels like if they go 0-2 and drop this game to Tampa, it feels like the it could go off the tracks, right? The train could really go off the tracks here very quickly. So I do think you're going to get a pretty desperate Bears team. But also on the other side, I think you're going to get a Bucs team that wants to prove that, week one versus Minnesota was not, Minnesota had 3 turnovers and that's why, okay, it was a big story. It was a big reason why, for sure. But not a lot of people mention, the second half, Minnesota didn't have any turnovers. And the Buccaneers were able to find answers on offense, and the Buccaneers defense was able to hold Minnesota at bay. I think people sort of forget that all the Minnesota turnovers happened in the first half. So it's not like they just kept turning the ball over and kept turning the ball over the entire game. No, the Bucs defense stood tall as well, and then the offense didn't have any turnovers. So I do think the Buccaneers want to prove that, they beat a team in Minnesota that I think a lot of people expected them to lose to. And then I think before the season, there was not as many, but I think there was a lot of people that expected the Bears to win this matchup right now. The Bears, they thought the Bears were the better team, adding DJ Moore and seeing Justin Fields' progression and everything like that. But I do think it's going to be an interesting game because I think both sides have something that they want to prove. It is always dangerous, I think, when you get a desperate team in here. Again, I know it's week 2, but after a performance like that and in front of your home fans, you just always seem to come out with more of an energy, right? And like a more of a desperation. So I am curious to see how both teams come out early in the going here, and we'll see.
It is the home opener for Tampa Bay, smack dab in the middle of September, so it's going to be hot. 1 o'clock kickoff. The Bears going to be wearing their orange alternate helmets with the orange jerseys and the white pants, and the Bucs obviously going to be wearing the white on white that we all love so much this time of year. But before we dive any more into the game, I wanted to talk about the biggest storyline of the week for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and that's going to be the absence of a couple of defensive starters. And before the season, we had talked about the depth of this Buccaneers team and how losing one of these guys could potentially put you in a really, really tough spot that week. And for this week 2 game in particular, the Bucs will be without starting corner Carlton Davis, defensive lineman Kalijah Kancey, and linebacker Servassier Dennis. So the 2 rookies, Kalijah Kancey did not practice all week with a calf injury. We saw him come in week 1 against Minnesota, made a play, had a quarterback hit on Kirk Cousins, and then that was the last we saw of him. I believe Servassier Dennis had a little bit of action, but we have not seen him since. He did start the week at practice, though. That is something to monitor because Carlton Davis, Kalijah Kancey, neither of those guys practiced all week. So you kind of knew from the beginning of the week, if this doesn't get any better, the writing's on the wall. But Servassier Dennis with a hamstring injury, this is my concern here. Wednesday, full go. Thursday, limited participation. Friday did not participate. Now, obviously, when you rank the losses...
It got worse. It got worse each day.
Yeah, that's definitely not what you like to see. Now, as far as importance, you'd probably put the loss of Servassier Dennis below Carlton Davis or Kalijah Kancey, but wanted to hone in on that injury in particular because, again, it's not often that you see a player full go at practice, limited the next day, and then by Friday, he's just not even out there. Not a great sign.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been something in practice. It could have been something that happened during practice, maybe at the end of practice. Who knows? Based on that, being full limited, did not participate. I would say that's probably more likely. I would say because even if he had something that was bothering him, he probably would have been limited from the start. So I don't think he would have been full go, especially with a hamstring. Hamstrings are, we always talk about it with, like Mike Evans, if he ever gets a hamstring, like hamstrings are tricky. It can feel good, and then one wrong move, and then you're back on the shelf. So, yeah, I mean, it's not great. Obviously, you just got to hope that Devin White and Levante David can stay healthy. Who's now their middle linebacker depth is even more thin. Obviously, KJ Britt's still there, but yeah, and obviously, I think the thing that people are going to want to talk about the most, which we'll get into, is obviously the loss of Carlton Davis. Like, obviously, big. I mean, even like Kalijah Kancey's a loss, but they have depth along the defensive line. Kalijah Kancey's not really a full-time starter yet. Carlton Davis is probably the best corner on the team. So that's something that I talked about, and not just me, tons of people have talked about all offseason, the inexperience in the secondary, right? The lack of inexperienced depth and what was going to happen when these guys got hurt, because history has shown Carlton Davis and Jamel Dean, they're not Iron Men. They don't play all 17 games. They will miss time. Jamel Dean probably going to miss a game or two here. Like probably. Carlton Davis already missing one game. We've only played one regular season game. He's already missing the next one. So it can be a little bit scary. And like I said, if the Bucs season was going to go off, again, just like I mentioned with the Bears, if the Bucs season was going to go off the tracks, this is the way it was going to go. Like, I think, the corners get hurt, the inexperienced depth in the secondary can't step up, and all of a sudden you're leaving your defense pretty exposed. Hopefully that doesn't happen. Hopefully just a 1 week thing for Carlton Davis. But if he's out anything long term, that could be a situation you're facing with the defense.
Yeah, Jamel Dean expected to be out there. Second-year corner Zion McCollum gets bumped up on the depth chart in the absence of Carlton Davis. The other defensive back I wanted to talk about who popped up on the injury report this week is Christian Izien. We know he had that goal line interception week 1 against the Vikings, a pretty strong game out of that nickel spot. He is in concussion protocol, did not practice Wednesday, limited participation Thursday, full participation Friday. He is listed as questionable, but with the Bucs already going into this with the idea that they're going to be shorthanded in the secondary, do you think Izien just goes ahead and plays this one?
It's always tough with concussions. I don't know, because you had that whole protocol and everything. It's really, when it's a concussion, it's kind of not up to the team or the player. It's up to the league's policy on that. So I think you have to see, one, does he wake up Sunday? Does he wake up with a headache, right? When he wakes up, like, does he have a headache? Is he dizzy? Like, that's something that I think you're going to have to determine the day of the game. And it could be like down to the wire, like go through warm-up, see how you feel. Like, that stuff matters. So I am kind of, I don't know. I think it's 50-50 for him. I do think that the questionable is truly questionable because, I'm just not sure. It could go either way. I expected him not to play, but then obviously throughout the week he progressed a little bit more, so maybe he's getting out of that protocol. But we'll have to wait and see. You'd like him to be out there, especially with Carlton Davis not there. I mean, then you're testing even more inexperienced depth. Maybe you'd put a guy like D. Delaney in his spot instead of having to start, like a Keenan Isaac or something like that, or anybody like that. Maybe, that's what you'd prefer, but hopefully he can go, because he made a handful of plays. He didn't just make that interception. He made a couple other plays during that Minnesota game as well.
So let's talk about the Bears' offensive philosophy coming into this one. It was an interesting week for them last week, again, because the offense didn't show them much of anything. It was kind of an incoherent mess from a play calling perspective. And Justin Fields, for another week in a row, I'm sure has caused a lot of infighting in that Bears fan base between the people who believe he can be a great quarterback in the NFL and some of the people who have already written him off as a running back. How do you think the Bears are going to come into this game? I mean, obviously they're going to notice the lack of Carlton Davis and maybe some of the secondary depth for Tampa Bay. And maybe they're looking to redeem Justin Fields from last week. Again, he hasn't really shown us that he is the best at throwing the ball, but it's still early in the season. And I think you're going to want to kind of set a benchmark for where your offense is going to be. Do we see an extra effort to push the ball down the field this week for Justin Fields?
I personally do. He threw the ball 37 times last week, and they were down for pretty much 90% of the game, so that's going to happen. Like, when you're down, you're going to throw the ball more. But he completed 24 passes for 216 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, had a fumble lost. So, 24 passes completed for only 216 yards. That tells me you're not really pushing the ball downfield. Like, you're not trying to push the ball downfield. To me, I think their objective number one, especially with Carlton Davis out, is going to be get DJ Moore the football. DJ Moore had 2 targets, caught both those targets for 25 yards. 2 targets. Basically traded the number 1 overall pick to help try and get this guy. Like, I know, obviously, you got the 9th pick and everything, but the object, like, if DJ Moore wasn't involved in that trade, you wouldn't have traded the number 1 overall pick. So, to me, they are going to have a clear emphasis on trying to get DJ Moore more involved, pun intended, I guess, in this passing game, especially with the Buccaneers' top corner out. So I would expect the Buccaneers to line up Jamel Dean a lot of the time with DJ Moore, but I have to think that it's going to be early and often that they're going to target DJ Moore. And then also Darnell Mooney, who had a really good day against Green Bay. So, is Mooney going to go against Zion McCollum? That could be something that they could exploit. Like, that could be, Zion McCollum, I think, is a heck of a special teams player. Like, he's really turned into a really good special teams guy. He's just a complete unknown. He is a complete unknown when it comes to actual corner, and that can be kind of scary because Darnell Mooney's pretty good.
He's still the young guy that gets picked on in that defensive backfield. I mean, when they roll him out there, a lot of the targets are going to go his way. I know it was, what was it, like his first ever start was that Christmas game against Arizona last year, and they were giving him hell. I mean, it was.
I think his first start was actually against Carolina.
Okay,
week. Was that week 8, I think?
Week 7, week 8. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I think it was against Carolina. I'm not sure. Obviously, DJ Moore played in that game. I'm not sure if Zion McCollum matched up against DJ Moore or not. But yeah, it wasn't pretty. It was sort of trial by fire. But hopefully, that was year 1. We don't know exactly what he looks like in year 2. So, hey, maybe he surprises some folks and be able to play well. That would be huge for the Bucs defense.
Yeah, let's just try and forget that 22 season altogether. But I wanted to ask you one more question about the wide receiver room for Chicago. What's going on with Chase Claypool, man? I mean, there's been a lot of headlines this week that say he may as well be a healthy scratch this week for Chicago and that they may have been seriously considering it after his effort or lack thereof in week 1 against Green Bay. Do you think we'll see him on the field? And at some point, do you think he starts to look like any sort of semblance of the receiver that they traded for who played in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't know what's one to answer the first one. I don't know what's going on with Chase Claypool. I don't know if he had a stomach flu that day. It was like, I'm going to play, but I'm not going to do much, or he's unhappy. I don't know because the effort or lack thereof was pretty appalling. Especially when you traded a 32nd overall pick for him.
Week 1. Yeah. If you're showing me that kind of effort week 9 and your team is 3-6 up until that point, then I get it because we've seen it in Tampa Bay.
You're a professional football player.
It's not great for an NFL player. Don't get me wrong. And for a guy who held as much value as he did just a couple of years ago, there's no excuse. But the fact of the matter is, there is a human element to these games, and if you're on just an awful football team, then that human element of you about halfway through the season is going to be like, man, is this really worth it? Like, do you want to just kind of show up and get a check for the rest of the year? Or are we going to go put our body on the line for these guys? But to feel that way week 1, I mean, that's pretty indicative that I just don't think he likes it over there. I don't know what's going on with him. I like him a lot.
Then instead of pouting and not trying, how about, you just ask out? Like, I mean, there's other ways to do it. Like, you're getting paid to play football. Go play football. Like, I don't understand it. We'll see if he's a healthy scratch. I mean, Claypool really hurt the Bucs when they played the Steelers last year. So for the Bucs' sake, kind of hope that he's not playing, because if Claypool does play, that could be a nice like trio of wide receivers there for the Bears against the banged up Bucs secondary. I mean, it could be DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney, Chase Claypool. Not the worst in the world. So, and then you got Cole Kmet, obviously at tight end, and we know the Bucs sometimes can struggle against the tight end. So, yeah, I mean, I have no idea. It is a weird situation, and again, it's just coming out of the week 1 game. It's just so much bad vibes with the Bears that I think they want to desperately try and get that taste out of their mouth. I mean, their defensive coordinator left the team. Like, their defensive coordinator isn't with the team right now. Like, he's not going to be at the game. Like, it's just, there's a lot of bad vibes right now. And I just think they need, in their minds, right, they need to come down to Tampa and right the ship, right? The train's going like this. Right, the train's going like this. If they can put it back like this, I think in their minds, I think a win in Tampa would do that, and the Bucs have to be prepared for that.
And it's funny because that's also the point of view of most of these teams traveling to Tampa to play the Bucs, or even have the Bucs visiting them on the road. It's one of those things where some of these teams have already looked at the Bucs on their schedule and just said, "Oh, that's a win. That should be a win for us." Right? Like, here's an easy win on the season that can get us back to the trajectory that we want to be. And obviously, the Bucs going to be looking to play upset for the second week in a row. One last question I wanted to ask about the Buccaneers defense before we look at the other side of the football. Last week against Minnesota, they only held them to 44 rushing yards, not rushing attempts. That'd be insane. 44 rushing yards, but we also know that Alexander Mattison may not be the most capable back after his performance on Thursday Night Football. 11 carries, 34 yards for him, averaging 3.1 yards a tote. We talked about the Bears coming into this with maybe, an increased incentive in wanting to push the ball down the field and wanting to get that pass game opened up early to maybe expose the lack of depth the Buccaneers have in that secondary. But as far as the run game goes and as far as the run defense goes, do you have any type of expectations at all for that Buccaneers run defense this coming week?
Not really sure. Obviously, facing Khalil Herbert, and it's tough when, as far as the run game, more focused on stopping the quarterback than the actual running back. Because the quarterback can burn you even more.
We could tie Justin Fields into the run game. I probably should have made that a point, but Justin Fields very much a much more shifty quarterback than Kirk Cousins was a week ago. So I think this run defense is going to have to be ready for, more than just the running backs coming at them.
It just, when you have a quarterback that can run like that, it puts pressure on everybody. It puts pressure on your defensive line, because when you're getting pressure, Justin Fields can avoid that. Justin Fields can escape out of the pocket. Kirk Cousins, probably not. So, it puts pressure on your linebackers, because the linebackers have to know where they're at all times as Fields going. The secondary, you sort of have to have like eyes in the back of your head when you're playing a quarterback that can run like Justin Fields. So as far as the run defense goes, I thought it was fine. The Vikings really, they threw the ball a lot, which shows you where they thought the Buccaneers' weakness was. And even last year when the Bucs run defense wasn't the same, right? Like 2020 and 2021, people were just trying to throw the ball as much as they could against Tampa.
Yeah.
Even in 2022,
you came into the game playing one-dimensional.
Right. But even in 2022, though, there were still people that most teams tried to just throw the ball and didn't really attempt to run it. But when they did run it, they were successful. Like, the run defense was not the same last year. So I thought it was fine on Sunday. I do think, Kirk, I'm looking at it now. He threw the ball 44 times, on Sunday against the Bucs. I don't know if you can expect Justin Fields to throw it 44 times, but Alexander Mattison only had 11 carries. So I think the Bears could maybe want to get the run game involved more. And that's also because it'll help out your quarterback. Like, that will help Justin Fields, especially when you can involve the read option and you can involve RPOs and all those types of things when you have a quarterback with Fields' athleticism. So I think the Bucs run defense is probably more important this week than it was last week. Obviously next week against Philly, after you saw what they just did to Minnesota on the ground, that's going to be a big test, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. But I think as far as the Bears run attack goes, I do think it adds an extra element and it adds an extra difficulty that Fields can also burn you. So I think they got to be on their toes. And I do think they can do fine. I think the run defense can be fine. I don't think it's going to get to 2019, 2020, 2021 levels of you cannot run the ball against Tampa. I do think it has lost its way a little bit in that sense. There's some guys, Ndamukong Suh's not there no more. Jason Pierre-Paul is a pretty good run defender. Those guys matter in the run defense, and those guys aren't there anymore. So I do think there's going to be some areas to exploit. I'm just not sure how much the Bears are going to exploit them with the actual running back. So I am curious to see, though, how the Bucs run defense goes, especially up against, what's going to be a strong Philly run game next week.
Yeah, we've talked a lot over the last 4 seasons about what the Bucs defense does consistently well. Well, they are consistently also questionable against a more mobile type of quarterback. So this is obviously going to be an X factor brought up whenever there is that added element of a quarterback who can just extend plays, get out of the pocket, run outside the numbers and set the edge, because a lot of these guys are getting faster every single year. But let's talk about the other side of the football now for Tampa Bay. Wanted to talk about the offense and wanted to open things up with the run game, because, we were not praising the run game. Obviously, there's some things that need to be better. Rachaad White in particular, it was a solid starting point for him, but I don't think the run game at any point completely controlled the game for Tampa Bay. Like, I don't think it dictated at any point why the Bucs were going to win that game. You know, when they needed to burn the clock out at the end of the game, they weren't doing it with inside handoffs. They did it with a couple of big passes, a scramble from Baker Mayfield, and a big catch from Chris Godwin to seal the game there at the end. So obviously, I think there's going to be an added emphasis in the run game this week because the Bears proved last week against Aaron Jones they couldn't stop a nosebleed. And these north-south runners are really where they get gashed, is what our buddy Larry D told me. So with Rachaad White being more of a north and south runner, I mean, my gut says to expect a pretty heavy workload for the second year back this first half. You think the Bucs try and establish the run early again this week?
I do. Aaron Jones had 9 carries for 41 yards. It's a 4.6 average, and he had a touchdown. So averaging over 4 yards a carry, that's really good. And so surprised the Packers didn't run a little bit more, but A.J. Dillon only had 13 carries for 19 yards, so not a great day for him. But Aaron Jones also really hurt him in the passing game. Only had 2 catches. One of them was a 51-yard touchdown, though. So he had 2 catches for 86 yards.
Guy was on the field for maybe 12 plays, scores twice.
But I actually, we started a new series on Mr. Bucks Nation channel called Betting the Bucks. And I just look at, James isn't really a betting guy. I am. So I wanted to tackle that series. And one of the props that I looked at and I said, sort of to keep an eye on was Rachaad White over 17.5 receiving yards. And I know we're talking about the run game in particular, like actually running the ball, but it's just a matter of, I think they're going to get Rachaad White more involved regardless, like whether it's the run game or the pass game. I think you're going to see a lot more of Rachaad White. I think they want to get him going early and often. Baker Mayfield threw the ball 34 times. I think they'd like to get that under 30, probably, be able to control the clock, keep Justin Fields off the field. Rachaad White, obviously, 17 carries. I mean, they tried, they especially when you're trying to burn clock a little bit, you're going to run the ball a little bit more, but only 39 yards, 2.3 yards average. Like, that's not going to get it done. So I do think they're going to try early to get Rachaad White involved in both the run and pass game. Rachaad White only had 2 catches for 10 yards as well. So I'm like, I just think in this Dave Canales offense, I envision the running backs getting more work in the passing game with screens and stuff like that, quick plays, check downs, especially Mayfield, who doesn't always like push the ball downfield. Like a lot of times it will be a check down. So I like Rachaad White over 17.5 receiving yards if you can still get it on DraftKings there. And also go check out Betting the Bucks. Like a shameless plug there. But I do think it's important. I think it's important to establish it because look, and now Baker Mayfield's on the injury report and like with a shoulder, and that's the shoulder that was bothering him in Cleveland, and it's only been one game. Like, do you really want him throwing the ball close to 40 times again? Probably not. So I do think it's pretty important to also for Rachaad White's confidence. Like, the more if he puts up another 17 carry, 39-yard day, people are going to be like, oh, Sean Tucker, and it's just, I think it's going to ruin what is a pretty, I don't know about great football player, but a pretty solid football player in Rachaad White. So I'm hoping for his sake as well, they're able to, one, keep the offense on schedule with those runs, and 2, be able to just do it, for his confidence, because I think confidence, especially in running backs and wide receivers, a lot of your skill positions, I think confidence is the biggest thing. Toughness, yeah, you got to have, but toughness to me is more of a trenches thing, right? Like you got to have that mindset in the trenches. Running backs, wide receivers, quarterbacks, corners, I think it's a lot of it is about confidence and confidence in yourself. So I do think they're going to try and get Rachaad White going early. However, I wouldn't be if it doesn't work. Like, wouldn't be surprised if they go away from it. Like they showed, like Baker, like I said, Mayfield threw the ball 34 times. I didn't expect him to throw it 34 times. The Bucs weren't down for most of the game, so I do think that it's something they're going to try, but they're also not going to be afraid to pull the plug quickly.
What was the number we said on the game preview show last week? I said, hey, if everything goes according to plan for this Buccaneers offense, they finish the game. Baker has less than 35 pass attempts. So 34, it seems like it was.
He did have less than 35.
But like you said, they obviously are going to want to dial that back a little bit more, because I think if you take away the missed throws, or even if he hits those at the beginning of the game, maybe he doesn't have to make a couple extra throws, and you're looking at right around 30 completions a game, or 30 pass attempts a game, if you will, and that's exactly where they want to be. But be sure to check out Betting the Bucs with Evan the Gambler Wanish. Talking a little bit more about this offensive identity for Tampa Bay, Dave Canales has made it no secret that they're going to emphasize running the ball. This Bucs offense is going to lean on the run game much, much more than any team we have seen probably in the last 10 years here in Tampa Bay, because usually a pass-first kind of offense. But did you hear him talk about some of those early game play calls last week, in particular the targets to O'Keefe? Like, Dave Canales, man, I like the guy more and more every single week. He was self-aware as it gets about it, and it was a nice change of tone from those condescending Byron Leftwich interviews that we got this time a year ago when they would bring the offense into question. As far as, what that early scripting is going to look like for Tampa Bay, you mentioned the quick passes for Baker. We mentioned the increase in the run game. But as far as Dave Canales, what he brings to the table, what are your expectations for him this week?
Yeah, it is a breath of fresh air. Just, the energy that he brings. And I know, and I'm not going to talk about it too much. Everybody's talked about it all offseason. Whenever you watch a press conference, he brings the energy and stuff like that. Like, I get it. But yeah, it is refreshing to see a coach that sort of, recognizes, like, look, like the offense, like, they were good enough to win that game. Like, are they going to be good? They might be good enough to beat Chicago. Like, if they play like that again, no turnovers, protect the ball, make some critical plays here and there. That might be good enough to beat Chicago. Is it going to be good enough to beat Philly? No, like it's not. Is it going to be good enough to even go into New Orleans and beat them? Probably not. It's going to be good enough to beat Detroit? Probably not. So, like, and that's their next 3 games after this one. So, like, I think they recognize they need to be better. At the same time, I do think that it's a work in progress, though. Like, everybody is trying to adjust to a brand new thing. And for that being the first game in a new system, I didn't think they were awful. Obviously, started off slow, like you mentioned. Some of it's execution, right? And that's why sometimes, Byron Leftwich was bad, right? Byron Leftwich wasn't a great offensive coordinator or offensive play caller. But sometimes I'd come on here and say, look, Byron Leftwich, okay, made these play calls here and there. Sometimes the players just got to execute. Baker Mayfield has O'Keefe wide open on a seam for a touchdown. He misses him. That's not on Dave Canales. And if Byron Leftwich was the play caller, that wouldn't be on Byron Leftwich. Like, that's on the players to execute that. Baker Mayfield missed a few other throws, early in the game. They couldn't get the run game going. Some of that's execution. Like, that matters. So I do think, as far as the expectations for Dave Canales, I'm expecting a better game, a more cohesive game, and a unit that looks like, again, they've already played a game together. Like, they've already have a game under their belt. I think the more you're going to play with that team, just like whenever, if you play like rec league sports, like, and you have that first game and you have a couple guys that but like most of the team you don't, and that first game is, we'll see what happens. Like, we'll see whatever happens. And sometimes it can be a jumbled mess. But by game 4 and 5, you're starting to play well because you've been playing together, right? You've been gelling together. And I think that could be the case for this offense. So hopefully they don't take a step back this week. That's all I'm hoping. Don't look worse, because to me, if you look worse ahead of the schedule that you have, it could be a sign for an alarm, especially against what I think. Like, look, I know the Vikings are 0-2. I still think the Vikings are probably better than the Bears. That's just my opinion. I think they're better.
I think they're definitely better than the Bears. I mean, they've been a bad team this year. Like, there hasn't been a lot of football played, but the Vikings look like one of the worst teams on the field this year.
Yeah, but like, even like against Philly, though, like, they battled back.
They did, yeah. They made it a game at the end.
And I know, like, okay, they scored that garbage time touchdown to ruin my Eagles minus 6.5.
Plus 6.5, right? Or minus 6.5. Eagles. I took the Eagles
completely ruin my night, and I lost by half a point. Oh my god. But anyways, listen to Betting the Bucs. I'm really good at betting. Yeah.
Hey,
that'll show you. But I mean, I think the Vikings are probably a better team, and the Vikings were at home. Like, I think that game is a tougher game, but any given Sunday, anybody can win. So, like I said, I'm hoping for I'm not expecting the Bucs to go out and score 34 points. Like I'm not expecting this big jump and oh my God, look at these fireworks and big passes, big plays all over the field. Not expecting that. Be slightly better. Just get slightly better each week and start building it up. And that's what I think. That's all you can ask for right now, especially when, like I said, they're trying to work in so many new pieces and they've lost talent along the offense. Like the offense isn't as talented as even it was a year ago. Like I know a lot of people were critical about the offense last year. And I get it, but they weren't as talented. Like right now, Shaq Mason is probably a better football player than Cody Mauch is. He probably is. Tom Brady last year, I know a lot of people were critical of Tom Brady last year. A better player than Baker Mayfield. I'm sorry, he is. And Russell Gage right now probably a better player than Trey Palmer. That stuff matters. So when the offense isn't as talented, you're looking for kind of baby steps, right? And just hoping to build it up, and hopefully they can do that again. Look a little bit better this week, where you're like, okay, yeah, the offense wasn't great, but it was better than last week, and that's, I think, a perfect scenario.
Betting the Bucs, I have got a bold prediction for you. Just something I think is going to happen. We were talking about Dave Canales and some of the tendencies so far that we have seen, some of those play calls week one. You know what I think happens this week?
What happened?
Give me a Coke Keefe anytime touchdown plus 1,000 on DraftKings, baby. So, listen, I know this is going to sound incredibly odd, but I have enough reason to believe that after a disappointing week one, Coke Keefe is going to get a couple more targets this week, and they're going to be in the end zone. And by God, he's going to bring one of them down. So, Coke Keefe anytime touchdown. Go ahead and give me that right now. Putting the money on the table. There it is, folks.
There you go. You heard it here first.
Let's talk about that tight end room really quick. I know we had talked about Coke Keefe and briefly mentioned the disappointing week he had last week. He makes any one of those catches. We're not talking about the play call. We're not talking about the amount of targets he got in the first two drives of the game. We're not talking about that stuff. But unfortunately for Coke Keefe, who does have some highlight reel receptions in his NFL career, just wasn't able to do that last week. K. Dotton, Payne Durham. K. Dotton made an appearance, made a couple of plays later on in that game, but do you have any expectations for the tight ends this week, or is it kind of similar to the offense where it's still kind of too early to tell?
Yeah, I think it is kind of similar to the offense. I think when you're looking at such a young room, literally the veteran is David Wells, and I think David Wells has only been in the league for 3 or 4 years, maybe. And that's the old guy.
So that's your veteran.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at that sort of room and how young and youthful it is, you're kind of hope. Obviously, you need more out of him. I think you definitely need more, especially K. Dotton, who is a guy they had high hopes for. 2 catches for 19 yards. Could have had 3 catches. Got to hold on to the football. I think that's a play they're looking for him to make, and I think it's a critical year for K. Dotton because, look, if the tight ends don't, and obviously I know it's way early, but if these tight ends don't perform this season, the Buccaneers will be looking for a starting tight end in the offseason. Whether it's through free agency or the draft, they're going to be looking for a starter in the offseason. So I think they're hopeful that K. Dotton can just be that guy and they can cross that off the list, but he's got to show it. So again, take the baby steps, show a little bit more this game. I was expecting the tight ends to be a little more involved than they were because of Dave Canales. But again, that's where I kind of warned people. I was like, okay, you can look at Seattle and you can look at what their offense did when Dave Canales was there and stuff, and you can look at certain things, but you can't base Dave Canales and what his offense is going to be based off of what Seattle was.
Right.
Because Dave Canales wasn't the play caller, and that's why I said, it's going to be his own thing. So, all right, Seattle uses the tight end a lot. Tampa Bay will probably use the tight end more than Bruce Arians' offense did, but who knows? Are we sure they're going to use it as much as Seattle did? You don't know. So I do think the tight end room is another one just like that offense where week after week you're just hoping that you're hoping that they can continue to progress.
So real quick, before we move forward, let's acknowledge some of the people in the live chat. I know we've been on a roll, and normally when we do these live shows, we give you guys some love a little earlier, but forgive us. Richard T. waking up early with us this morning, 7:15 a.m. in his time zone over there on the West Coast in Los Angeles. Clack 5 White, Buck Wild, Willie Beeman, the moderator, hanging out with us, Emily Compass and Anto Gatto. I think I said that correctly. Bucs, Rays, Bolts, David DeStefano, and anybody else that I missed. Truly appreciate you guys hanging out with us. Can't forget Adam Davies, our good buddy from Bucs UK. But I do have a question here in the chat from Buck Wild, and it's the last thing I'll ask about the tight end room. For the people who ask, we bring up the experience factor or the lack thereof. Buck Wild says, for our tight ends, is it too early for me to judge? I just still wish that we kept Cam Brate headed into this season. And I heard you address this on the Mr. Bucks Nation live stream earlier this week for the uninitiated. Evan, what are your thoughts on Cam Brate? But what are your thoughts on just the overall lack of a veteran presence, as some people would call it, in that tight end room? Is that going to hold them back this year?
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to hold them back, but I would have added a veteran. Probably not Cam Brate. It was time. To me, it was time. There comes a time when there's going to be players on this roster, that have been on here a long time, and it's going to be like, all right, like,
not to cut you off, but I think Cam Brate is going to be one of those guys, kind of like Vincent Jackson was one of those guys, where like when they retire and they ride off into the sunset, there's not going to be a big post on Instagram. There's not going to be a big announcement about it. The organization isn't even really going to acknowledge it. They're just going to kind of transition into that post-football life. And if Instagram this week tells me anything, Cam Brate is living his best life. He was on a boat partying with our buddy Bo Allen. Like, I mean, it's the middle of football season, and it's like Wednesday. They look like the unemployed friends out there on the pontoon. And I wouldn't rather be anywhere else, don't get me wrong. But to me, a guy like that definitely knows that he's probably not going to be coming back to football, at least this season.
Yeah. Why would you? if you can do that. I also see he has a kid on the way, so congratulations to Karen Brate as well. So, I just don't think he had much left in the tank. Now in turn, I do think though they should have added a tight end. I think they should. There had to be somebody out there that you could have added. I wouldn't have drafted one. They did draft a tight end, Payne Durham. That's fine, but like I wouldn't have drafted one high or anything. But I would have signed a veteran just to have in that room. And like people would say, "Oh, re-sign Kyle Rudolph." No, like I would have signed a different veteran tight end, but I probably would have added a veteran. But it's not a huge deal. It is like, I don't think the youth is crippling them. So I'm not like, oh my God, this team would have been in January. Like if the Bucs missed the playoffs, I'm not going to say, man, they would have been a playoff team if they just had a 30-year-old tight end. I don't, that's not going to matter. I think in the grand scheme of things, especially when I think Cade Otton would have been the starter anyway. So yeah, I don't think it's a huge deal, but personal preference, if I was running the team, I probably would have signed a veteran.
Before we get into some keys of the game, I wanted to talk about the offensive line. Another week in a row where a lot of eyes are not only going to be at that left tackle position, but pretty much every other position on that offensive line. Left tackle Tristan Wirfs, Matt Filer at the left guard spot, Robert Hainsey at center, Cody Mauch going to be coming back. No injury report this week for him with the back injury. He's good to go for week 2 at the right guard spot. And then Luke Gedeke at right tackle. Again, this unit, for what people expected, had a pretty good game week 1. Luke Gedeke had his moments, don't get me wrong. I think there were more than a few times where he struggled against a better pass rusher like Danielle Hunter when he was lined up over Gedeke. But, you look at the defensive line for Chicago. They've got Yannick Ngakoue there at the edge. He's pretty good, able to get after the quarterback. But Andrew Billings at D tackle, Justin Jones at D tackle, DeMarcus Walker, the other defensive end position, Rasheem Green, Zach Pickens, Gervon Dexter Sr. and Dominique Robinson round out that defensive line rotation. But are there any other names on that defense, even some guys that they send on a blitz? Is there anyone you think could give this offensive line some issues?
Obviously, they have Yannick Ngakoue, but their defensive line wasn't very good against Green Bay. I hate to say no. Eddie Goldman could be one because I think he's a solid player. But there's not. I think one of their big issues on defense is probably their pass rush. They just don't have a lot of it. So hopefully the Bucs offensive line can respond to that and play well. Because I think they played well. Again, they played well enough last week. But You want to see it continue to get better as that group of 5 guys, right? As they continue to play together, and continue to develop chemistry and everything like that. I think that's important for an offensive line. I think chemistry on the football field between a quarterback and a wide receiver is important, but I also think on an offensive line, more so on an offensive line than a defensive line. A defensive line, you're going to attack. Like, you're worried about your individual stuff. An offensive line, like, you got to realize, where's the pass rush coming from? If I go to this guy, is my guard going to have that guy? Like, you have to be able to have some trust there and have some familiarity with your guys. So hopefully, again, just like, can you stack up? Like, can you get better? And hopefully they can, which against a Chicago pass rush that I don't think is overly impressive. I'm sure that'll come back to bite me, and win or loss. Like, if the Bucs win, but I'm sure the Bears will have like 5 sacks, and I'll have to eat my words on that. But I just don't. I don't see it from the Bears pass rush with that, unless they're blitzing like a ton with TJ Edwards or Tremaine Edmonds. Like, I don't see it.
It still feels early in the season, but former Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive lineman Ian Beckel said on his podcast this week that he is done worrying about Tristan Wirfs. He's done. He's not going to hear it anymore. He's not worried about it. He said he saw one game week 1 where Tristan Wirfs, even if he is less of a player than he was last year, he's still a significant upgrade over what we had at left tackle this time last season. Do you feel the same? Because I know it's only been one game, but I can't argue with that logic. Like, if Tristan Wirfs at left tackle is 2 steps below the right tackle that he was, but he plays as well as he did last week, he's going to be an all-time great left tackle.
I was basically, in my mind, I was basing it like, I'll evaluate at the bye week. So give me 4 games of it, and I'll take a look at it, and I'll evaluate it. So I'm not there yet. He was good. I mean, you didn't hear his name at all. And when you don't hear an offensive lineman's name, that's a good thing. So he was good, but I'm just waiting until the bye week for that, for me to say, like, if the bye week and I'm still like, then I'll have no worries. And I don't have any like over worries. Like, I never did. I did think it was a partial concern just because it was the unknown. Like, it was the unknown of how he's going to do switching a position, but like, I was never truly worried. Like, I'm never like, oh my God, I think he's going to be terrible. Like, I'm not sitting there going like that. But yeah, get me into the bye week, and then we'll see from there.
Yeah, and I don't think anyone was worried about him being terrible, but I think a lot of people beg the question, what does an average Tristan Wirfs look like? Because I do think there was a more realistic chance that, hey, he's an average left tackle, but he's an all-time great right tackle. Well, so far, we haven't seen it. But, another former Tampa Bay Buccaneers player who we actually talked a lot last year with this about, Sean King mentioned the topic of longevity, especially for offensive linemen, inexperienced offensive linemen. Tristan Wirfs, aside from when Khalil Mack flipped him over, has really never looked vulnerable in his NFL career. Last week, I don't think he did either, but like you said, by the time the bye week comes around, can we look at 4 full games of Tristan Wirfs at left tackle and be like, all right, this guy's untouchable? This guy's pretty good. This guy's slated to be your starter for the rest of the year. I believe yes, because me, alongside a lot of other people, have a lot of faith in Tristan Wirfs. I think you have enough faith in Tristan Wirfs, even though you are a lifelong skeptic. I think you believe he could do it and play well. But, we heard about that consistency with these offensive linemen. Last year we saw it with Luke Gedeke, and then we saw it with Nick Leverett after Luke Gedeke got pulled. So not only for Tristan Wirfs, but the rest of this offensive line, the consistency over the next 3 weeks with pass rushes who seemingly get better every single week is going to be a huge test for this team.
Yeah, no, I think it is. Obviously, you're playing Philly next week. They got 2 great edge rushers, Brandon Graham, Hassan Reddick. So that'll be a test. You're facing Cam Jordan again. So yeah, I think you're going to find out, I think, and you're going to find out fairly early. Like I said, that's why I'm waiting to the bye week, I think that's, if he passes both those tests, like, again, right now, I don't have like, ask me a 1 to 10 of my like concern level. It's at like a 2. Like, it's not, I'm not like concerned about it, but like, I need to see a little bit more. That's all before I'm getting ready to say, oh, franchise left tackle. Yeah. I need to see a little bit more.
All right, let's wrap it up with our favorite segment on the Game Preview show. I feel like we have a different name for this every year, but it is the weekly checklist is what we call it. Normally we have 3 things the Buccaneers have to do to win this game. Now, week 1 last week, we did not get around to the weekly checklist, but again, it's week 1 for everybody, so we just forgot, right? This week, we're on our P's and Q's, so let's do it. I have got 2 right out of the gate, and maybe they contradict each other, but we shall see. The first one seems kind of obvious, but keep the pressure on Justin Fields. You know, he is still a young quarterback. I know that Chicago proved they wanted to go all in, but he's not indestructible. He is going to make mistakes. And I think he is more susceptible than a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who maybe leads the league in turnovers right now. But I do think, in the grand scheme of things, Justin Fields is more susceptible to turning the ball over, making those rookie mistakes, than a guy like Kirk Cousins. And I think this Bucs defense, even though they're missing Carlton Davis, I still think they're going to be in good enough shape to be a team to be able to make that happen. And my second key of the game, weekly checklist point, whatever we want to call it, I would like to see them keep that pressure on Justin Fields without relying on the blitz, at least as much as they did last week, because a lot of their biggest plays of the game, I mean, there was the botched snap, but the Antoine Winfield Jr. strip sack, if you don't send him on that blitz, he's not getting home. How much can your 4-down offense or defensive lineman do this week against an offensive line and a quarterback for Chicago who have proven to struggle in the past? That's what I'm waiting to see. And I think the Bucs, I think Todd Bowles is going to be curious this week too, because 2022, he got away from the blitz, as we mentioned. And I think 2023, he wants to do that a little bit more. But that's what I'm going to be looking at on defense.
Yeah, real quick note on blitzing. I agree, because also, you blitz Devin White or Levante David or Antoine Winfield Jr., and they miss. Kirk Cousins can escape the pocket a little bit, but he's not going to escape it and run for 20 yards. Justin Fields can. So you do want to be careful when and where you're sending those blitzes. So, yeah, my thing, number one, protect the football. They did such a good job of that last week. Never really even put the ball in harm's way last week. I mean, there was never even like some throws from Baker, like, oh, like got away with one there. So protect the football. I think that's just key for the offense here. 2 is get the run game going. I think that they need to be better against the run or with the run. I think Rachaad White needs to have a better day. I think the offensive line needs to have a better day blocking for him. So at 17 carries is a fine number. Like that's good. But I think they need to be better on the ground. And then 3, just, to me, I think the secondary just got to hold up. You got to hold up. I'm not sure who's going to be available in that secondary on Sunday. Like Carlton Davis, we know isn't available. Christian Izien might not be available. So hold up the best you can. And yeah, just because I think when Justin Fields is dropping back to throw 30 plus times, there's going to be opportunities to get interceptions, and there's going to be opportunities to make plays on the ball. So take those opportunities when you can, but just try and hold up against the Bears passing attack that, like I said, their trio of wide receivers, Claypool plays, like they're not bad. Like it's not a bad trio. So just hoping that the secondary plays better than they did last week in the first half, because the first half was not pretty. So hopefully it's a little bit less zone, a little bit more man. I do think that maybe since Carlton Davis is out, that might lead to more zone. Zone's easier to play than man, especially when you're down guys. But we'll have to wait and see what happens. But those are probably my 3.
All right, my last thing on my list, and this hasn't been on a weekly checklist for either one of us for probably over 3 years. And I'm not saying I don't trust the guy, but I'm saying
I know
make your kicks.
I know it is, yeah.
Make your kicks. It's tough to make kicks in Tampa Bay. And no, I don't think this is going to be a game that's decided by a field goal at the end of it. But you get 2-3 field goals throughout the course of this one, then I definitely think that goes a long way. I would just like to see him continue to be great. Ryan Suckup, I think a lot of people, maybe we can acknowledge it now. I hope it's not too early, but seems like that one curse we had went away.
Hey, don't.
Hey, don't get mad at me. I'm just saying, if Chase McLaughlin continues to make his kicks, then we can continue to celebrate here in Tampa Bay, because it hasn't been an issue for a while. And you don't know if a Bucs kicker is good until you know they can kick in Tampa. Look what happened to Matt Gay.
I will say, yeah, McLaughlin, he was perfect in Minnesota, but even though it's not in Tampa Bay, it's also inside. So there is no wind, there is none of those elements, right? None of the outside elements are there. So besides the crowd noise, it's
you show me a 40-yarder, doesn't even have to be that long. You show me a 35-yarder right down the middle, left hash on September 17th in a 1:00 game. It's gonna be 110 degrees, 2,000% humidity. I mean, the ball's just gonna be mucking its way through the air. That's how thick it's gonna be down there. So if you show me that, that's all I need. So one more week of Chase McLaughlin just going out there and doing his thing. And, hopefully he gets more opportunities at PATs than field goals this time around. But regardless, should be an interesting game. Score predictions. Hate to put you on the spot, but who do you got?
Yeah, so I think the line was 3. Then it moved to 2.5. It was 3 for Tampa. Tampa was the home favorite. Now, and it moved, and now it's still at 2.5. So I actually, on betting the Bucs, I do like it at 2.5 because I initially had the Bucs, and I'm sticking with this score. I think the offense is going to be slow. I think it's going to be an old school, and I think I predicted this on the season prediction show too. An old school, an NFC Central type of game. I had the Bucs winning 17-14.
17-14. Look at that, down in
another 3-point win for the Buccaneers.
See, I think whenever the Bucs play the Bears, it's always 2 types of games. These last 5 seasons, whenever the Bucs have played Chicago, either it's frustrating and it's a grinded out and it's a low-scoring affair, like you said, 17-14. That sounds like the type of game to me that reminds me of Thursday Night Football in Chicago where Brady forgot it was fourth down.
Yeah.
That kind of game where it's just frustrating and you don't really know until about halfway through the fourth quarter how it's going to play out. The other times the Bucs play Chicago, Tampa's all over that ass. So I think that usually happens. That usually happens in Tampa as well.
In Tampa, yeah.
In Tampa,
I remember
last time they played
Chicago.
in Tampa was
Never forget when
2021.
Mitchell Trubisky threw 5 touchdowns in Chicago.
In Chicago, that was 2018. Hold on, buddy. Hold on, that was 2018.
You said the past 5 years.
You're right. Okay. Outside of that game, I'm sorry that fell within my criteria.
You can't just pick and choose a game. You can't just do that. You can't say, every time that the Bucs play the Bears, but except for that one game, we don't talk about that game. But every time they play the Bears, except for that one, the Bucs dominate.
Since that game, see, I thought we put that behind us.
If you really look at Jameis Winston, right?
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Forget all the interceptions.
That's not what I'm saying.
Look at all the touchdowns, though. I mean, come on.
That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm thinking of the 2 home games where the Bucs just absolutely ran through them. The home opener, I think that 2018, 2017 season with the home opener where they absolutely killed Chicago.
2017, yeah.
Yeah, because Mike Glennon was still playing in Chicago at that time.
That was his first year.
So outside of that game, the 38-3 beatdown they had in Tampa a couple of years ago, this game is not going to get that ugly. Don't get me wrong. There's not that much of a talent discrepancy between these 2 teams, but I have the Bucs putting up some points, and I have them winning.
It would be nice if you knew.
It would. 27-17.
Okay.
And 27 seems like an odd score, but I think it's.
It's only
3 touchdowns, 2 field goals. That's what
I mean, if Baker Mayfield hits Keefe last week, they have 27 last week. So
you are correct. So there is my score prediction. I've got the Bucs winning. Evan has the Bucs winning. Richard T says Bucs 27, Cocaine Bears 9. Only 9 points. Let me see. Any more score predictions? No more score predictions in the live chat. Just Richard T on the West Coast, but we appreciate you guys hanging out with us. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's just about going to do it for this week's game preview episode of the Cannon Fire podcast. I know we jumped on here a day later than we usually do our game preview, but it's just kind of been a busy week and got to make the best of our schedule. But moving forward, we will be locked in. I promise you, unless it's out of our control, kind of like yesterday was. But looking forward to watch the game tomorrow. We will be live right here, youtube.com/Cannon Fire podcast, immediately following the game. Also, do not forget, on the Mr. Bucs Nation YouTube channel tomorrow, James Hill, the prodigal son, has returned. He will make his return to his channel for the game day reaction stream for the first time. I think the first time all year.
First time all year?
Yeah, I didn't even do any of the preseason.
First time since that Dallas playoff game.
Man. Man, it's been a long 8 months, huh?
I don't know if he's going to remember how to do it.
Yeah, he's just going to be completely inept.
Yeah.
Should be fun. Make sure you guys go check that out. And again, tomorrow, right after the game, right here, youtube.com/Cannon Fire Podcast. We will be live and taking your calls as we react to the best and worst of the Buccaneers versus Bears Week 2 battle. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host Evan on Instagram at Bucs_daily. You can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. What's on the slate this week?
Yeah, obviously, the whole Bucs Nation staff has the game covered. I'm doing like post-game reactions, like basically fan reactions on Twitter. So I'm doing articles for that. Obviously, we have the Q&A already up with Windy City Gridiron, I believe, is the Bears site. So go check out the Q&A now. It's called Davy Jones Locker. It's up on the site now. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff coming out.
Last but not least, you can find myself Instagram and Twitter at Retticus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back. But that's the show. Thank you guys once again for tuning in live early this Saturday morning. I'm your host, as always, Rhett Matthew, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. We'll talk to you in the next one. Until then, and as always, thank you again for listening, and go Bucs.